Picture a piece of paper, smaller than your hand, brown, almost grey, creased down the middle where someone folded it in half, then folded it again, then kept it in a coat pocket for 2 days because they didn't want to lose it. It's not fancy paper. It's not writing paper at all. It used to be the bottom of a grocery bag, one of the ones with the thin rope handles that cut into your fingers when the bag gets heavy. Except this bag was never heavy. This family hasn't had a heavy grocery bag in a year and a half. On this piece of paper, in pencil, because ink costs money and pencils can be sharpened down to nothing before you throw them away, someone has written a list: lard, flour, salt, dried beans, oats, soap, 1 onion if possible. That's it. 7 items, no meat, no eggs, no milk listed, because the children get powdered milk from the relief station on Tuesdays and Fridays, and this is a Wednesday, and the next Tuesday feels very far away. No butter, no sugar, no coffee, 1 onion if possible. That qualifier is doing a lot of work, if possible, as in, we know it might not be, as in, we've done the math, and the onion might be the thing that doesn't make it onto the counter, as in, we have learned in the last 18 months to stop expecting. We're going to Detroit tonight. Not the Detroit you might know from photographs of gleaming factories and wide avenues and signs that say Motor City, USA. We're going to the other Detroit. The one that was there at the same time, just around the corner from all those photographs. The one where the smoke from the Ford River Rouge plant hung over neighbourhoods where men stood in the street at 8 in the morning in their work clothes because they had nowhere to go, because the factory gates were closed, because Henry Ford had decided, in the way that very rich men decide things, quietly from behind walls, that he didn't need 60,000 workers anymore. He needed 20,000. And the other 40,000 were on their own. Detroit in 1932. Population 1.5 million, give or take. Unemployment somewhere around 30%. Some neighbourhoods higher. Black Bottom, where the black community had been packed by decades of housing discrimination into the blocks east of Woodward, running 40-45% out of work. Hamtramck, the Polish enclave completely surrounded by Detroit city limits, 43%. Paradise Valley, which was not a valley and not much of a paradise, running numbers that the city stopped officially counting at some point because the numbers were too embarrassing to write down. And even that doesn't capture it, because 30% unemployment means 30% of the people who had jobs are now without them. It doesn't count the people who were already poor before the crash. It doesn't count the people working 20 hours a week and calling themselves employed. It doesn't count the wives and children who are never in the official workforce to begin with, but who are now the entire economic strategy of their household. Taking in laundry, selling eggs from 2 chickens on a tenement roof, walking 6 miles to a relief station because the one on their block ran out of flour on Monday and doesn't resupply until Thursday. Detroit in 1932 smells like coal smoke and boiled cabbage and wet wool that never quite dries. It smells like the Werner's ginger ale factory a few blocks over, that sweetness cutting through everything else like a taunt. It smells like the River Detroit in summer, which is a complicated, muddy, industrial smell, not the clean river smell you might be imagining. It smells like 6 people living in 4 rooms, sharing 1 bathroom with 2 other families on the landing, and underneath all of that it smells like something harder to name, something like held breath. Like people who are waiting to see if things get worse, and discovering repeatedly that yes, they can. So I make these history stories. I have no idea if any of you actually sleep to them, or if you're all just people with a specific interest in economic catastrophe and the particular sound of a pencil writing on a paper bag. Either way, get comfortable. There's no execution tonight, no public hanging, no theatre of official cruelty. Tonight the cruelty is quieter. Tonight it happens in an apartment you can hear through the walls. Here we go. Your eyes open before the alarm, not because you're rested. You haven't been properly rested in long enough that you've stopped thinking of exhaustion as a condition and started thinking of it as a permanent feature of your face. Your eyes open before the alarm because some part of your brain, the animal part, the part that doesn't speak in words, has decided that sleep is a luxury and you should stop pretending otherwise. The alarm is set for 5:30. You're awake at 4:53. The bedroom is cold. Not metaphorically cold, not a bit chilly, better put on a sweater, cold. Cold in the way that the city of Detroit gets cold in November of 1932, which is cold like a punishment. Cold like the landlord's indifference, which is connected actually, because the landlord is the one who controls the furnace in the basement, and the furnace runs on coal, and coal costs money, and you are 3 weeks behind on rent, and in no position to be making demands about heating. The cold is sitting on your chest. It's in the bed sheets, which are thin. You have the good blanket and the wool blanket on the bed, and Ruthie has the other wool blanket because she's small and she feels it more. The two boys, Jimmy and Carl, are in the other room under their coats and their father's old work jacket and whatever else you could pile on them when they went to sleep. You lie still for a moment. 1 breath. 2. There is a ceiling above you with a water stain in the shape of a thumbprint. You've memorized this ceiling. You've had a lot of time to look at it in the last 18 months. 18 months since the layoff notice, typed on a piece of Ford Motor Company letterhead, informing you that your services at the River Rouge assembly facility were no longer required, effective immediately, and thanking you for your contributions to the company. The company did not thank you for the 3 fingers on your left hand that were damaged in 1928, when a press jammed and your foreman told you to reach in and clear it, and you did, because that was the job, and that was what you did. 2 fingers healed. The third didn't quite come back all the way. It bends wrong at the middle knuckle. On cold mornings like this one, it aches like a memory of something that hasn't left. You're 34 years old. You look 50. You know this because last spring, before spring turned into summer and summer into the fall you're currently surviving, you passed a shop window on Gratiot and caught your reflection without expecting it, and the man looking back at you was someone's father, someone's tired, grey at the temples, worry-lined father, and you thought, when did that happen? When did that become the face? And then you thought, it happened when the factory closed, probably. Or it happened before that, and the factory just accelerated the schedule. Dorothy is still asleep beside you. You can tell by the particular evenness of her breathing. She's a shallow sleeper, Dorothy. Always has been. Startles at sounds that wouldn't wake you. But when she's genuinely under, truly under, there's a slow rhythm to it that sounds like something peaceful happening in another country. Let her have it. She was up until past midnight. You heard her. She thought you were asleep, which was kind of her, because she was doing the thing she does at midnight. Sitting at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pencil, moving numbers around, trying to find a configuration of numbers that works. That adds up to something other than what it adds up to. She does this every few days. You used to do it together. Then it started feeling like fighting somehow, even when you weren't fighting, even when you were both completely calm. just moving numbers around on paper together in the kitchen at midnight, and it started to feel like an accusation you were both making and receiving simultaneously. So now she does it alone, and you lie in bed and pretend to be asleep, and that's one of the small, sad arrangements you've arrived at in the last 18 months. You slide out of bed carefully. The floor is cold through your socks. Your socks have a hole at the left heel that you've been meaning to darn and haven't gotten to. The cold seeps through the hole directly, efficiently, as if it found the weakness on purpose. You're wearing your union suit. Your work pants and shirt are folded over the chair. You dress and undress in the same order every day now, not out of habit exactly, but out of a kind of careful stewardship. Clothes wear out, faster if you're careless with them. You've become very careful with things. The kitchen is at the end of the short hallway. You move through it in the dark. You know where everything is. You know where everything is because there isn't much. The kitchen. Let me tell you about this kitchen, because the kitchen is the heart of the whole story. More than the factory, more than the relief station, more than the streets outside with the men standing on corners. The kitchen is where everything is measured and accounted for, where the math of survival happens in real time with real objects. It's maybe 10 feet by 8 feet. Less, actually. There's a gas range against the far wall. You have gas, which is something which is more than some people have. There's a window over the sink that looks out onto the air shaft between your building and the one next door, which means it looks out onto a narrow brick gap in someone else's window. The Kowalski family is in that apartment. 3 kids. Frank Kowalski had the same layoff notice from Ford that you did. Almost the same day. Different department. Same result. On cold mornings you can sometimes see the breath from their kitchen through the glass, which means their kitchen is also cold, which means the cold situation is affecting them too. You take a strange, shameful comfort in this sometimes, not because you want the Kowalskis to suffer, but because suffering alone is worse than suffering alongside someone who understands the exact shape of it. There is a table, 4 chairs, though one has a cracked leg that you've repaired twice with wire and will repair again when it breaks again. On the table right now, Dorothy's piece of paper from last night turned face down. You don't turn it over. A coffee cup, empty. The last little dark ring of coffee dried into the bottom. You stretch the coffee grounds further than you should, reusing them twice, sometimes 3 times, which produces a liquid that is technically coffee, the way a puddle of rainwater is technically water. A salt shaker. An ashtray with 2 cigarette butts in it. You smoke about 2 cigarettes a day now, sometimes 1. Rolled from bulk tobacco that you buy when you have any to spend on something that isn't food, which is rarely, which is why there are only 2 butts. On the counter beside the range, a tin of lard, almost empty. You can feel the weight of it when you move it, the specific disappointment of a tin that's lighter than it should be. A bag of flour with the top folded down, a box of salt, 3 potatoes, 1 onion, 1 onion. This is the pantry of a family of 4 at the end of a week in November 1932. You stand at the counter and look at it for a moment. Your hands are resting flat on the counter surface, which is cold linoleum over wood, and you can feel every irregularity in the surface through your palms. There's a crack near the back where water has gotten under and the linoleum has started to lift. You keep meaning to fix it. You light the burner. The gas hisses and catches with a small pop. Blue flames spreading around the ring. You fill the pot from the tap. The water runs cold, then colder. The pipes in this building run along exterior walls in some places, and when the temperature drops they slow to a trickle, and sometimes stop entirely. Today they work. You've learned to be grateful for working pipes. You set the pot on the burner. Oats. That's breakfast. Oats with salt, no sugar. You ran out of sugar 4 days ago. The boys won't complain. Jimmy, who is 9, has learned not to complain because he's old enough to understand roughly what is happening even if no one has explained it to him in those words. Carl is 6. Carl still sometimes says he wants sugar and then watches your face, and then doesn't say anything else. That's the thing about children. They're so fast at learning the map of you. They know which roads to stay off of. You pull the grocery bag from the drawer, not the full bag, the flattened saved bottom of a bag from 3 weeks ago, from the Gorski Brothers' grocery on Chain Street, that Dorothy saved because paper gets used. Paper gets used for everything now. You wrap things in it. You stuff it in windows where the draft comes through. The boys have paper in their shoes. Not newspaper, which you used to use, but paper bags, which are thicker and last longer before they turn to pulp. You take the pencil from beside the stove. The pencil is short. 2, maybe 2.5 inches. There's a trick to writing with a pencil this short. You hold it differently, more like you're gripping a nail than writing a letter. You look at the counter. Lard. You need lard. The tin is almost gone. There's maybe 2 tablespoons left. Not enough to get through the week. Without lard, you can't fry anything. Can't grease the pan for cornbread. Can't make the fried potatoes that are dinner 3 nights out of 7. You write. Lard. Flour. You're down to the bottom of the bag. Maybe 1.5 cups left. Without flour there's no bread, and without bread there are meals where there's just soup. And just soup for growing boys means Jimmy and Carl going to bed still hungry, which they do sometimes anyway. But at least with bread there's something solid. You write. Flour. Salt. The box is full enough. You write it anyway because the box won't stay full and you want to remember to look. Salt. Beans. Dried beans. You have enough for 2 more days if you stretch them. 3 if you use less than you should. The soup you make from dried beans with the salt pork if you have it, or without if you don't, which lately you mostly don't, is the main food. The anchor food. The thing that you build other meals around, or that you eat alone when you can't build anything around it. Dried beans, oats. You're almost out of oats too. Oats, you stop. You add. Soap. Then you stand there with the pencil hovering. The pencil is short enough that your fingers are almost touching the paper. Dorothy's hands would be smaller here. She has small hands, Dorothy does. Or they used to seem small before they got rough from laundry work and washing and the cold, and now they're her hands, and you stop thinking of them as small or large, and just think of them as hands that work. You write, 1 onion if possible. You look at the list. Lard, flour, salt, dried beans, oats, soap, 1 onion if possible. The budget, the actual real amount of money you have to spend at Gorski Brothers this morning, is 73 cents. You know this because you counted it last night before Dorothy started her midnight numbers session. 73 cents. 42 cents of it is coins, dimes and nickels and pennies, the pennies smoothed from years in pockets, the dimes almost black with age and handling. 31 cents is a folded bill, a quarter and a nickel and a penny that you straightened out with your thumb against the table edge before folding it, because folded money feels more real somehow, more intentional. 73 cents. Lard is 9 cents a pound at Gorski Brothers if you buy the store brand. 12 cents for the good brand, which you haven't bought in a year. You need at least a pound, preferably more. Flour is 3.5 cents a pound. 5 pounds will get you through 2 weeks if you're careful. That's 17.5 cents. Salt is 2 cents. Dried beans, 4 cents a pound. You need 2 pounds minimum. Oats, 8 cents for a large container. Soap, 4 cents. Onion, 1 cent. 9 plus 17.5 plus 2 plus 8 plus 8 plus 4 plus 1. 49.5 cents. You have 73. That leaves 23.5 cents. This is the good news, such as it is. This is the news that Dorothy's Midnight Numbers session produced at some point last week, that if you buy exactly these things and nothing more, you come out on the right side of the math. But here's what isn't on the list. Milk for the boys on the days the relief station is closed. Coal, which you desperately need. The landlord controls the furnace, but if you had a little coal you could warm the kitchen, just the kitchen, just for a few hours in the morning and evening. The heel of your shoe has separated from the upper on the right side. You've been pressing it down with your thumb before each step when it's wet outside, because wet feet mean you'll get sick, and if you get sick there is no money for a doctor. Jimmy needs new shoes entirely. He's at an age where his feet are growing, and his current shoes are half a size too small, and you can see it when he walks sometimes, a slight wincing. These things are not on the list. They are not on the list because there is no money for them. They are not on the list because making a list of things you cannot have is a kind of cruelty, and you have enough cruelty happening to you from the outside without adding to it from within. You fold the paper bag carefully. Once, then once again, the fold crisp and precise. You put it in your coat pocket. Your coat is the coat you've had for 6 years. A heavy wool overcoat, dark grey, with one button replaced by a button from a different coat that doesn't quite match. You bought it new in 1926 when you were making $3.50 a day at River Rouge, and that felt like real money. It still fits. You've lost weight in the last 18 months. Most men around here have. And the coat is slightly large on you now, which actually makes it warmer. The extra space around your body holding heat better than a tight fit. You sit down and put on your shoes, the right shoe, the separation at the heel. You press it down with your fingers first, feeling the gap, then work your foot in. The shoe holds, for now. The left shoe. Fine, you tie them carefully. The laces on the right shoe are shorter than they should be. You had to cut off a frayed section and retie a knot. And now the bow is small and tight, and you have to be precise about it, or it comes undone. You are very precise about it. Outside, through the thin walls, through the window glass with its single pane and its rope of twisted cloth stuffed in the gap between frame and a sash where the draft comes through, Detroit is doing what Detroit does in November. It is grey, it is cold, it is making the specific low sound of a large industrial city in the early morning. Not the roar of day, not the silence of actual night, but something in between. A hum, a murmur, the distant sound of a streetcar somewhere on Gratiot. A dog, someone's door. You put on your coat, you go to check on the boys. Jimmy's awake. You can tell because he's lying too still. Children who are asleep move. Children who are pretending to sleep become very, very carefully motionless. They become official-looking sleepers, deliberate sleepers, performing the act of sleeping with a concentration that is itself a kind of wakefulness. Jimmy at 9 is a good faker, but not quite good enough. I know you're awake, you say. A pause. How do you know? Because you're sleeping like a piece of wood. Jimmy opens his eyes. He's got Dorothy's eyes, that particular shade of dark brown that goes almost black in certain lights. Smart eyes, already a little older than they should be. Carl is actually asleep, sprawled on his side, mouth open, one arm hanging off the narrow mattress the two of them share. Carl sleeps the way only small children sleep, with absolute commitment, with no reservations, with the full body weight of unconsciousness. Carl is 6, and he hasn't learned yet that sleep might not always be available when you need it. "Papa," Jimmy says quietly. Quiet because he's learned to be quiet in the morning. He hasn't been told to be quiet in the morning. No one sat him down and said, "Jimmy, quiet in the mornings. Your father needs his rest." He just learned it from watching the apartment and what happens in it. "Yeah." "Are you going to the store?" "In a while, after breakfast." Jimmy looks at the ceiling. He has the same ceiling you have, the same building, the same water stains, though his is shaped more like a boot. You've had this thought before, that you and your sons lie in your beds and look at the same building ceiling and have it in common. "Do we have oats?" "Yes." A pause. "Okay," Jimmy says. "That's all." "Okay." He asked the question that was actually several questions. Do we have food? Will there be breakfast? Is today a day where things are roughly all right? And he got the answer that contains all the actual answers, and now he settles back and closes his eyes. You stand in the doorway for a moment. You have a thought that you won't put into words. It goes, "This should not be your son's first question when he wakes up," and then you put the thought away, because it leads somewhere you can't afford to go before 7 in the morning, and you go back to the kitchen and make the oats. The oats take 9 minutes. You know this because you count them, not out loud, in your head. The kind of counting that's really just giving your mind somewhere to be while your hands do the work. The pot heats, the water comes up. You pour in the oats, watching the white particles spread and sink. You stir with the wooden spoon, the one with the stain from a pot of beans that got too thick back in July, the stain now just part of the spoon, permanent, as much a part of it as the grain of the wood. You stir, you count, the oats thicken, you divide them into 4 bowls. You make sure the boys' portions are largest. You make sure Dorothy's portion is the next largest, which she will notice and refuse, and you'll argue quietly and she'll eat it. This happens most mornings. You give yourself the smallest bowl, salt on each bowl, a small shake, more on the boys', less on yours. Salt has to last. By the time you've set the table, cups of water, spoons that don't match but are all functional, you can hear Dorothy moving in the bedroom, the particular sound of her feet on the floor, then her footsteps in the hallway, then she appears in the kitchen doorway, dressed, her hair done though her face still has the slight puffiness of someone who didn't sleep enough. She looks at the table, at the bowls, at your bowl, which is clearly smaller. "No," she says. "Good morning. Give me that one." It's already George. She only uses your name like that when she's made a decision. When she uses your name flat and straight like that, one syllable, the way you'd put a full stop at the end of a sentence, it means the discussion is over before it started. You trade bowls. You sit down together and eat. The oats are hot. They're bland. No sugar, no butter, the salt doing the work of flavour. But they're hot and thick, and they fill something. There's a specific warmth that travels from your throat to your chest when you eat something hot on a cold morning. A warmth that feels almost medicinal, almost intentional, like the food knows what it's doing. Carl wakes himself up by falling off the mattress. There's a thump, a pause, and then, "I'm okay." Jimmy comes into the kitchen first. Carl comes in 30 seconds later, dragging the wool blanket behind him because he hasn't let go of it yet. He sees the oats. "Is there sugar?" he says. "No," you say. Carl looks at his bowl, looks at you. "Okay," he says. He's learning Jimmy's word. You leave the apartment at 8. The grocery store opens at 7:30. Gorski Brothers doesn't do the later city store hours. It opens early because its customers are working people, or used to be. And old Gorski hasn't changed his hours to reflect the fact that many of his customers are not working people anymore. You take the stairs down, 4 flights. The stairwell smells of other people's mornings, coffee from somewhere, the Nowak family on the 2nd floor making something that involves onions at 8 in the morning. You don't judge. Onions are onions. Onions are food. And underneath that a damp, cold smell that is the building itself, the plaster and wood and brick absorbing another winter. You push through the door and you're outside. The cold hits you in the face like a flat surface, not the gradual cold of walking from one temperature into another, the door to outside cold of Detroit in November, which is immediate. Your lungs take their first breath of outside air and feel it. Sharper, drier than the apartment air, carrying particles of coal smoke and exhaust and the particular smell of a city street in wet weather. It rained last night. You can see it in the street. The cobblestones glistening where they're still wet. The gutters with their slow trickles toward the drain. The sidewalk slabs darkened with moisture. The sky is the colour of old dishwater. Cloud cover complete. The kind that means the sun will not be showing up today. The light is flat and directionless. Cheene Street. You know this street. You've lived on it, or within 2 blocks of it, for 11 years, since you arrived from Hamtramck with Dorothy and nothing else in 1921. Since the factory jobs were plentiful and real. Since the thing they called the automobile boom was in full roar. Since Detroit was the city that everyone said was the future of America, and maybe it was. Maybe it really was, before the future became what the future became. Cheene Street now. The produce cart at the corner isn't there yet. Old Zanowski usually sets up by 8:30, but he's been irregular lately, sometimes not showing up at all. And when he does show up, the cart is thinner than it used to be. Fewer things on it, things you don't recognize as vegetables. You've heard he's been buying from a different wholesaler. Or the regular wholesaler raised his prices. Or both. There's a man sitting on the front steps of the building across the street. He's wearing a grey jacket that's too light for the temperature, and he's got his hands between his knees and he's looking at nothing. You don't recognize him. Could be a new tenant. Could be someone who doesn't live there. Could be a man who simply stopped here because here was where he stopped, and he doesn't have anywhere that counts as a next place to go. This is a thing you see now. Men sitting on stoops at 8 in the morning. Men who have nowhere to be at 8 in the morning, because the place they used to be at 8 in the morning doesn't want them. You know exactly how that feels. You know it from the inside. You walk north on Cheney. The neighbourhood is a layering of years. The buildings from the 1890s and early 1900s, the brick storefronts with their flat stone faces and the apartments above, 3 stories usually, sometimes 4. The buildings from the 1910s and 20s, slightly newer, sometimes with the Corinthian flourishes that were fashionable then, now slightly grimy, slightly less grand than their architects intended. Between them and over them, the advertisements. Coca-Cola in red on the side of a building 2 blocks down, though someone has thrown a rock through the sign and the sea is cracked. Buy victory bonds from the war, the paint faded almost to nothing. New ones. Relief available, Clark Branch, Tuesdays and Thursdays. The relief station sign is hand-painted. It's not as well done as the Coca-Cola sign. The letters wobble slightly. You pass a group of men at the corner of Cheene and Ferry. There are 4 of them. 3 are men your age or close to it, wearing good coats worn to badness, standing with their hands in their pockets. The 4th is younger, maybe 22, maybe 23, wearing a cap pulled down over his ears. They're talking in Polish. You catch words. Fabryka, which means factory. Pieniądze, which means money. Jutro, which means tomorrow. Tomorrow. We'll try again tomorrow. There might be something tomorrow. You nod to the oldest of them, a heavy-set man with a white moustache whose face you recognise from the neighbourhood without knowing his name. He nods back. That's the transaction. That's the full extent of it. I see you. I know what's happening to you. I know because it's happening to me. You keep walking. There's a grammar to Detroit in 1932 that you have to know to read the streets right. The grammar goes like this. The city was built for a particular future, and that future showed up, and it was magnificent, and it lasted about 12 years, and then it became something else, and the buildings are still here from the magnificent period. But the people inside them are different now. The Packard plant on East Grand Boulevard. You can see the top of it from here, the brick smokestacks that used to breathe grey smoke continuously, day and night. The factory running 3 shifts. It ran 3 shifts until 1931. Now it runs 1 shift, partial days. The smokestacks are quiet this morning. You can see that from here. The absence of smoke, the clear cold sky above those stacks. Absence of smoke is what unemployment looks like from a distance. The Hudson's department store on Woodward. 15 stories of retail that was designed to be the finest department store in America, and may have been, with its bronze fittings and its electric elevators and its pneumatic tube system that whisked money and change between floors in metal canisters. Hudson's is still open. The wealthy do not stop needing department stores because other people stop eating. But the wealthy are thinner on the ground here than they were, and the pneumatic tubes whisk fewer canisters these days. The Fox Theatre, which opened in 1928, you went to the Fox once, you and Dorothy, in 1929 before everything changed, for $1 each, which was real money but which felt worthwhile. The Fox has 5,000 seats. 5,000 seats, and when it was full, which it sometimes still is on good nights, the sound of the audience, the collective breathing and the shuffling and the laughter, makes a particular sound that you can hear from outside. The sound of 5,000 people momentarily forgetting their situation. It's 8 in the morning. The Fox is dark. Belle Isle, in the middle of the Detroit River, Frederick Law Olmsted designed it. The man who designed Central Park, which should tell you something about the ambitions of this city in the years before the ambitions got ahead of the results. Belle Isle has a casino, which is not a gambling casino, but an entertainment facility, a dance hall, a place where on a summer evening in 1926 you and Dorothy danced to a band that played something sweet and slow, and the lights were on over the water. You haven't been to Belle Isle in 3 years. And River Rouge, the River Rouge plant. You'll get to that. You'll get there because you have to. Because your errand, today's errand, takes you in that direction, or close enough to it that the question of whether to walk past it is not really a question. The question is whether you can do it without something happening to your face that you'll have to explain afterward. But that's later. Right now, the grocery store. The bell above the door rings when you push it open. It's a small brass bell, the kind that was put up 30 years ago when Stefan Gorski, old man Gorski the father, opened this store and decided a bell was more dignified than shouting "customer" every time the door opened. Stefan Gorski is dead. His sons, Peter and Marek, run the store now. It's technically still called Gorski Brothers, though one of the brothers, a third one, the youngest, went to Cleveland in 1928 and hasn't come back and doesn't seem to be planning to. The smell of the store hits you the moment you're inside. It's a composite smell, built from years of the same things occupying the same space. Coffee, because there's a grinder on the counter and they grind it fresh, or they did when people were buying coffee by the pound and not by the ounce. Sawdust on the floor, still sawdust, still the old-fashioned way, though it makes the floor look old now in a way it didn't in 1926. The slightly sweet, slightly dark smell of dried beans from the open bins along the right wall. Salt pork. The barrel is behind the counter, and when Marek opens it to fill an order, the smell is strong and complex, fat and brine, and the particular smell of preserved meat, which is a smell that your body responds to with something close to longing. You don't need to respond to that longing this morning. Salt pork is not on the list. Salt pork is 11 cents a pound, and 11 cents is a different week's list. The store is not large, maybe 20 feet deep, 12 feet wide. The counter runs most of the length of the right side. Behind it, Marek Gorski is already in his apron, writing something in the ledger book that sits permanently open on the counter end. Marek is 42. He has the specific look of a man who's been kind all his life and is now being tested on how much kindness he has left. His face has a natural softness to it, round cheeks, expression that defaults to neutral, but tips towards sympathy with only minor provocation. His apron is clean. He irons his aprons, which his brother Peter considers extravagant, and which Marek considers basic dignity. "George," he says without looking up from the ledger. "Marek, you're on first-name terms because you've been coming to this store for 11 years. You were on last-name terms for the first 2 years, Mr. Kowalski, Mr. Gorski, and then sometime around 1923 it switched, the way these things switch in a neighbourhood, gradually and without ceremony." He finishes writing whatever he's writing, sets the pencil down, looks up. He looks at you the way people look at you now. A quick assessment, not unkind, just, "How are you, actually?" He does this with most of his regular customers. He can tell things from how you look. He's been in this store for 20 years, and he's developed a sensitivity to the particular ways that financial stress shows up on a person's body. "What can I get you?" You take the list from your pocket, unfold it. The paper bag square, the pencil list. "Lard," you say. "Pound. Store brand." He turns to the shelf. The store brand lard is in the plain tin with the green label. He sets it on the counter. "Flour, 5 pounds. He measures it out from the bin into a paper bag, tying the top with a piece of string. His movements are practiced, economical. He's been filling flour bags for 20 years and he doesn't spill. Salt, beans, 2 pounds. Oats, large container. He works through the list. Each item goes onto the counter in a row. The lard tin, the flour bag, the salt, the beans, the oats. Between each item there's a small moment of arithmetic happening in both of your heads. Marek knows his prices, you know your prices. You're both running the same calculation. "Soap," you say. He puts the soap on the counter. It's a yellow brick of laundry soap, rough surfaced, the kind that does everything. dishes, clothes, hands, when you can only have one soap. And you stop. Look at the list. 1 onion if possible. Onion. Marek picks one up from the basket, sets it on the counter. He looks at the row of things. He's not adding it up out loud. He's a gracious man, Marek. He doesn't make you feel the math by performing it in front of you. 67 cents, he says. You have 73. You reach into your pocket and count out the coins. The pennies first. You've been counting them since you left the apartment, arranging them in order in your palm. Dimes and nickels, the folded bill. 67 cents counted onto the counter. Marek takes it, opens the register. George, he says. He doesn't look at you when he says it, which is how you know it's going to be something that requires not looking. I know, you say. 2 weeks. I know. The tab. The account in the ledger book, because Marek Gorski, like his father Stefan before him, runs a tab system for regular customers in hard times. 2 weeks of groceries, bought on credit, to be settled when the money comes in. You've been on the tab since July. You pay what you can when you can. 2 weeks is what he's told you is the limit. 2 weeks behind is the most he can carry for any one customer. His own margin isn't large. He has suppliers to pay too. By Friday, he says, I'll have something by Friday. You don't know if this is true. You have 6 cents left after today's transaction. By Friday, you need to have something. From somewhere. Relief check or work money. Something. Marek nods. He bags your things in a new paper bag. You notice this, the new bag, not a recycled one, because he knows about the shoe paper and the window stuffing and the list writing. He knows these things because he watches, because his whole business now is in understanding the specific economies of his customers' lives. The bag he gives you is good and full, and he doesn't make you feel the weight of its charity. The onion, he says, I gave you a big one. You look in the bag. He did give you a big one. It's a good onion, firm, properly cured, the papery outer skin intact, which means it'll keep. You nod. Pick up the bag. The bag is not heavy. That's the thing, 7 grocery items for a family of 4, in a bag that's not heavy. You push out through the door. The bell rings above you. Outside the air is cold and flat and the same as it was. On the way back you take the longer way. Not the longest way, not the way that goes past River Rouge, that's for this afternoon, but the longer way that goes past the church and the relief station and the particular block on Beaubien, where you know there will be women, because there are always women on this block at this hour now, and you walk past them not because you need to see them, but because you can't always keep choosing not to see things. The church is St. Stanislas Kostka, Polish parish. The whole neighbourhood is Polish, has been since before you were born, when the Poles came to work the factories and the slaughterhouses and the tanneries and stayed because they'd found the thing their grandparents crossed the ocean for. Work. Enough work. Work that wore you down and sometimes took parts of you. Fingers, lungs, years. But work that paid in actual money. Not the old country's landlord economy. Not sharecropping. Not the feudal arrangements that sent so many people westward and then eastward and then to cities like this one with exactly nothing except their willingness to show up and do the hard thing. The church is stone. It has 2 towers, slightly mismatched, which you've been told is traditional. Some German medieval cathedral thing. Asymmetry is humility. We don't presume to symmetry. The towers have copper weather vanes at the top, green with age. On the front steps of the church, a group of women. There are 8 of them, maybe 9. Several are wrapped in shawls over their coats, the layering of women who have learned that the spaces between garments are where warmth lives. Several have children nearby, small ones, toddlers who are not standing still but moving in the orbits of their mothers, touching and retreating and returning. One woman, the one sitting on the second step, has a baby on her lap. The baby's wearing a hat that's too big for its head and has been folded up at the brim so it doesn't fall over the baby's eyes. The baby is staring at nothing, then at everything, then at nothing again, with the complete equanimity of someone too young to understand what equanimity is necessary for. The women are talking. You can hear it as you pass, the undertone of it, not the words, but the register and pace of women comparing notes. Comparing lists, actually. This is a regular informal exchange. Who has what available at which station? What came in on the last relief truck? What didn't come in that was supposed to? Who has flour, or who has extra salt, or who has the address of that woman on Hartwell who will trade a chicken for help with washing? This is the information network of the neighbourhood in 1932. It runs through the women. It has always run through the women. The men stand on corners and talk about factory jobs and Ford and the city government and Roosevelt versus Hoover, and some of that talk matters, and some of that talk is the talk men do to maintain the feeling of agency when agency has mostly been removed. The women talk about food and fuel and children's shoes and how cold it is going to get, and what the relief station is giving and what it isn't. The women's talk is more useful. You know this. Dorothy knows this. This is not a thing you say out loud. One of the women on the steps, Mrs. Wisniewski from the building on the next block, whose husband was a foreman at Dodge, Maine until last spring, looks up as you pass. She has a face that in another life would be called kind, but which has been compressed, refined, by the last 3 years into something more efficient than kindness, something more like watchfulness with warmth. "Morning," she says. "Morning, Mrs. Wisniewski." She glances at your grocery bag, not rudely. It's the same reflex you have, the same reflex everyone has now. The glance. What do they have? How are they doing? You've done it yourself. You do it constantly. Her expression doesn't change, but she nods slightly. You're doing about as well as everyone else. That's the conclusion the glance reaches, and the nod communicates it, and you both move on. The relief station is half a block down. The sign on the door, the hand-painted one, Clark Branch, is already out, which means they're open. A woman is just going in, carrying an empty canvas bag. You don't go in. You don't need to today, or you won't until Friday, and if you go in when you don't need to, you're taking from the stack that other people need. This is a calculation you've gotten very precise about. Relief is not infinite. It's not bottomless. It's funded by the city, which is funded by taxes, which have been declining because the tax base, employed workers with incomes, has been declining. The city of Detroit is, in the fall of 1932, basically insolvent. The schools are running 30-day terms instead of the full year. City employees are being paid in scrip, paper promises of future payment, instead of actual money. The mayor has been personally calling wealthy Detroiters and asking them for contributions to keep the city functioning. This is where the money comes from to stock the relief station on Beaubien. You put this information in the part of your mind where you keep things you understand but don't know what to do with. You head home. The bag is in your right hand. You switch it to your left because your right hand is colder. The coat's right pocket has a small hole at the bottom, and the cold gets in. You pass a boy. maybe 10, maybe 11, sitting on a stoop eating a piece of bread. Just bread, nothing on it. He's eating it in large, efficient bites, the bread disappearing faster than seems comfortable. He's not chewing slowly. He's eating the way people eat when they're not sure when the next eating will be. Not wolfing it down, not frantic, but with a focused efficiency that has no room for taste or enjoyment. Just bread, body, done. He looks up as you pass. He doesn't look away quickly or look down the way a child might who is embarrassed to be seen eating alone. He just looks at you with a sort of calm assessment. His eyes are very brown. He goes back to the bread. You go up the 4 flights of stairs. Dorothy is at the kitchen table when you come in with a cup of something. The reused coffee grounds at this point producing a liquid that is the colour of weak tea and provides, you estimate, roughly the suggestion of caffeine, rather than the substance of it. You put the bag on the counter. You take things out one by one and put them in their places. Lard tin, flour bag, salt box. You add this to the existing box, tipping the new salt in. Beans into the ceramic crock with the blue lid. Oats into the tin. Soap on the shelf above the sink. The onion. You hold the onion for a moment. It's a good onion. Marek was right. It's a large one. Almost as big as your fist, firm and heavy. The papery skin rustling slightly as you turn it. You put it in the bowl on the counter where you keep the vegetables. The bowl now contains 3 potatoes and 1 onion. Dorothy is watching you from the table. 67 cents, you say. Down to 6, she nods. He give you any trouble about the tab? Friday. I'll have something by Friday. Taking in more washing? Mrs. Zawadzki has a pile, and there's... She stops, looks at her cup, looks back at you. I heard from Anna that they're looking for women at the Hotel Statler. Cleaning, just mornings. You look at her. There's a conversation that is not happening right now, but that you've had versions of before, that lives in the space between you on the question of Dorothy working for wages outside the home. Not because you have any principled objection, you don't, or you've worked hard at not having one, because principle in the face of this kind of poverty is a luxury item and you've become very careful about luxury items. But because the Hotel Statler is 35 minutes each way by streetcar, and the streetcar costs money, and if she's doing hotel cleaning then someone needs to be with Carl in the mornings, and Jimmy can't watch Carl and get himself to school, and the boys need shoes. I'll look into it, Dorothy says. It's not a question. It's the end of the conversation. I'll look into it too, you say. I heard about something at the River Rouge. She looks at you. Not a job, you say. Relief work. The city. They're doing street work. She's quiet for a moment. When? This morning. They're taking names this morning down near the gate. Or that's what I heard. She nods. Go, she says. The walk to River Rouge is not short. It's about 4 miles from Chain Street to the River Rouge complex, following the line of Jefferson Avenue as it curves southwest along the river. If you had 5 cents, you'd take the streetcar. You don't have 5 cents. You have 6, and 6 cents is being saved for a day when you have no choice. So you walk. The walk takes about an hour and 15 minutes on a good day. Today is not a bad day. The rain from last night has stopped. The streets are wet but walkable. Your shoes are holding. Your shoes are holding. You start down Jefferson. Jefferson Avenue is the spine of the east side of Detroit, running from downtown outward toward the river and the old French farms that ran perpendicular to the water, a system of land division so old that it predates the United States. The ribbon farms, long narrow strips running back from the river frontage, a French inheritance from a time when the river was the highway and you wanted your property touching it. The roads that eventually replaced those farm boundaries still run in those old patterns, and Jefferson is the big road that runs alongside them all. In the good years, 1925, 1926, 1927, 1928, Jefferson was a road of two kinds of traffic. The regular city traffic, streetcars, delivery trucks, the occasional horse-drawn wagon of an old man who hadn't updated to motor yet. And the factory traffic, the shift-change streams of men walking in, walking out, the rhythmic flood and ebb of a working-class neighbourhood timed to the plant whistles. Now, mostly the first kind, some of the second but thinned out, men walking alone or in pairs, with the particular gait of someone who has somewhere specific in mind and isn't sure what they'll find when they get there. You are one of those men. The river is on your right after a while when Jefferson gets close to it. The Detroit River in November is gunmetal grey and enormous, wider than you always remember it when you haven't looked at it in a while. It's about half a mile across here. On the Canadian side, Windsor is a smudge of buildings and smoke. The freighters move slowly, laden with something going somewhere. Steel, probably. Iron ore. Coal. The stuff that made this city and made this river into the busiest commercial waterway in the world for a long stretch of years. The river doesn't know it's a depression. The river just moves. There are men fishing from the bank. You see them as you pass. 3 men, spaced out along a stretch of bank, lines in the water. They're not dressed for recreation fishing. They're dressed for standing outside in November with a purpose. There's a bucket beside the nearest one. He's actually fishing. Actually catching. There are 2 fish visible in the bucket, small ones. The kind of river fish that would not have impressed anyone in 1927 but impresses people differently in 1932. You think about this. The river as food source. The river as backup plan. You've thought about fishing before. You don't own a rod. The boys have never been fishing. Your father took you once back in Poland, in a river you don't remember the name of, and you caught nothing and it rained and your father laughed and said the fish were smarter than both of you. This is not a useful thought. You keep walking. The industrial stretches begin about 2 miles out of downtown. The smell changes first. The coal and soot and chemical smell of heavy manufacturing layered over the river smell. The buildings get larger. Warehouses. The Ford glass plant. Rail lines crossing the road at grade. The gates down now for a freight train moving slowly. A string of black cars that takes 3 minutes to pass. 3 minutes. You stand and watch it. The train goes. The gates lift. You cross. And then you can see it. The River Rouge complex is not a factory. That's the thing you have to understand. You know this. You've worked there. But even knowing it, even having spent 4 years inside it, the scale of it from the outside is something that requires a moment. The River Rouge complex is a city. Not like a city. An actual city, by any reasonable definition. It has its own railroad, with over 100 miles of track inside the complex. It has its own power plant, which generates enough electricity to power a mid-sized American city, which it does, in a sense, by powering itself. It has its own police department, its own hospital, its own docks on the river. At peak production, in 1929, River Rouge employed 75,000 workers. 75,000 people came through those gates every shift. You were one of them. You stood on the line. You did your specific, precise, repeated thing. You won't describe it as your job anymore, because that phrase belongs to a category of things that has been removed from your life. But you did the thing you did, which was, you worked the press that stamped door panel sections for the Model A, and you did it with specific timed movements, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 4 years, and you were good at it, and it paid real money, and it was the thing you organised your life around. Now you're standing outside the gate with 70, 80, maybe 100 other men. The gate. The River Rouge. Main gate is a large brick structure. Institutional, imposing, the kind of architecture that says this place has the authority and permanence. There's a guardhouse in the centre, where the security men sit. In 1929, in 1930, those guards were waving workers through, checking badges, keeping the flow moving because there were 75,000 people to process and no time to waste. Today the guards are standing at the closed gates and the men are on the outside. You walk toward the gate. You see faces you recognise. Not everyone. The plant was enormous and you knew your department. Not all 75,000. But here and there, pole faces you know from the neighbourhood, from the church, from standing in exactly this spot before. A man named Wisniewski, not the same Wisniewski, the husband of the woman on the steps, a different one, is standing near the fence smoking. He nods when he sees you. Hear anything, you say. Day labour, he says. City contract. They're doing some road work on Jefferson, taking names. Where do you go for the names? You go to the foreman. He's supposed to be here at 9. It's 10 after 9. You and Wisniewski stand near the fence. Neither of you looks at the gate directly. It's the kind of thing you've learned not to look at directly. The way you don't look directly at something that embarrasses you. The gate represents a specific kind of grief, and that grief is better acknowledged peripherally than head-on. The plant is running in a reduced way. You can tell from the smoke. Some of it, not all. 3 of the smokestacks are active. Before, all of them were. The sound is there too, the low thrum of heavy machinery that is so constant and pervasive that you stopped hearing it after your first month, and only notice it now in its different form, its reduced form, its form of not as much as before. The Ford Service Department men are visible near the gate. You know about the Ford Service Department. Everybody knows about the Ford Service Department. They're not policemen exactly, not officially. They work for Harry Bennett, who works for Henry Ford, and their job is to maintain order on the grounds and in the surrounding area. And their definition of maintain order is broad enough that you've seen them do things that would be called assault if a private citizen did them. They don't touch anyone today. Today they just stand. But they're watching, taking in faces. You know this because a man who came to the gate last week told you that he recognised one of the servicemen outside his apartment building the next day. You keep your face neutral. This is a skill you have now. Neutral face. At 9:30, a foreman comes out of a side door in the fence. He's carrying a clipboard. He's a city worker, not a Ford man. You can tell by the coat, the city issue coat, tan canvas with the DPW patch on the shoulder. Day labour, he says, not particularly loudly, which means the men who are further away don't hear, and the men who are close, you and Wisniewski and about 30 others, lean in. Road crew. 3 days' work, maybe 4, 75 cents a day, $3, maybe 4. This is real money. The foreman looks at his clipboard. I've got 10 spots. There are 30 men. You watch them do the arithmetic the same way you're doing it. 10 spots, 30 men. I need men with outdoor work experience, the foreman says. Digging, paving, that sort of thing. Hands go up. Almost everyone's hand goes up, including yours. Because if you have a pulse and 2 arms, you're claiming outdoor work experience today. The foreman goes down the line. He's picking by what? Appearance? Physical condition? He's looking for big men, strong men, men who look like they can swing a pick for 8 hours in the cold. You understand this without resentment in the abstract. But when his eyes pass over you and move to the next man, something in your chest does a thing that isn't quite a feeling, but is the location where feelings happen. He takes 9 men. He gets to the end of the line and he needs 1 more. You put your hand up again. He looks at you. Road work, he says. Digging. You done it? Yes, you say. You have done it, in fact. In the years before River Rouge, when you first came to Detroit and were working wherever work was, you dug drainage ditches for a city contractor in the summer of 1922. You know what digging in cold ground feels like. You know the way the mattock rings when you hit a buried rock. You're big enough, he says. He's not being unkind. He's being practical, in the way that physical labour is practical. He needs bodies that can move dirt. He's looking at your coat, which is slightly large on you now, looking at the way you're carrying yourself. Big enough, you say. He looks at you for another second. Then he writes something on his clipboard. Tomorrow morning, he says, 6:30, Jefferson and Bellevue, bring your own gloves. He walks back through the gate. The 20 men who didn't get spots stay where they are for a moment. Then they start to disperse, slowly, back in whatever direction they came from. Wisniewski looks at you. 6:30, he says. He made it too. 6:30. Bring your own gloves. He looks at his hands. I have gloves. Me too. This is true. Your work gloves are still in the drawer in the bedroom, because when they gave you the layoff notice, they let you take your personal items, and your gloves were in your locker, and you took them. You kept the gloves. You didn't know why at the time. You had a job, or you just had a job, and the gloves seemed like a talismanic object. If you kept the gloves, something to come back to. If you gave them away, you were deciding something you didn't want to decide. You still have the gloves. The leather is stiff from not being used. You'll need to work them soft tonight. You walk away from the fence, away from the gate. You don't look back. It's 11 in the morning, and you have nowhere to be until tomorrow at 6:30. This is a specific misery that doesn't get talked about much. The temporal problem of unemployment. The time problem. You're accustomed, as a grown man in an industrial city, to having your time owned. 8 hours of work, the hours before and after structured around the work. Sleep calibrated to the alarm, calibrated to the shift start. Your body organised around a schedule. Now your time belongs to you, which sounds like freedom and is the opposite. Now you have hours that need to be filled with something, and the something that should fill them, work, is absent, and the things that remain are not enough. There's only so much time you can spend looking for work before you have looked everywhere available and must wait. There's only so much you can do in an apartment that's 4 rooms in a building, where the landlord controls the furnace and there's nothing to fix because everything broken costs money to fix. You walk. You've become a walker. In the last 18 months, you've walked more of Detroit than you walked in the previous 10 years combined. You know streets you never had occasion to be on before. You know which blocks the relief stations are on, which churches have soup kitchens, which streets are faster in the morning and which ones are slower. You know which neighbourhoods have gotten worse and which have somehow held steady. You know the park on Belle Isle where you can walk for free and where in summer the trees make shade that feels like a different city? Cooler, greener, the river visible through the leaves. You've sat on benches in that park and watched the freighters move and not thought about anything in particular, which is a kind of relief. You know the library on Woodward, which is free to enter and warm inside and where you can sit for hours, reading things that are not about unemployment if you choose them carefully. You've read about ancient Rome in that library, about the history of China, about botany. You've read things that have nothing to do with your life at all, and this has been one of the small, genuine pleasures of the last 18 months, which is not a pleasant thing to acknowledge, because it means that the leisure you've gained through catastrophe has given you something. You've thought about this carefully. You've decided. The pleasure of the reading is real. The means by which it became available is not acceptable. These two things can be true simultaneously, but today you don't go to the library. Today you walk toward Hastings Street because there's something you need to see. The neighbourhood called Black Bottom. The name comes from the dark, rich soil of the river delta that used to be here, agricultural land before the city spread over it. Not from the people who live here now, though people sometimes make that mistake. The people who live here now are black Americans, most of them from the South, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, who came north in the Great Migration starting around 1915, following the factory jobs and the possibility of wages that weren't the near slavery of sharecropping. They came to Detroit because Detroit was hiring, and the auto plants paid black workers, sometimes in some departments, a wage that was closer to what white workers made than the South had ever offered for anything. They were kept in Black Bottom not by choice but by the covenants. The restrictive covenants written into property deeds throughout Detroit that said, explicitly, that the property could not be sold to or occupied by anyone of African descent. Black Bottom and its neighbour Paradise Valley were where Black Detroit was permitted to exist, and it was permitted to exist there in dense proximity. 4 or 5 families and apartments built for 2. Before the crash, Black Bottom was vibrant in a way that the Depression can't entirely erase. The jazz clubs on Hastings Street, the Flame Show Bar, the Forest Club, the El Cino, the black-owned businesses, beauty parlours, insurance companies, the Michigan Chronicle newspaper. Paradise Valley, which the black community called the Valley, with its music and its barbershops and its restaurants. Now, harder, even harder. Because before the Depression, black workers in Detroit were already in a worse position than white workers. Last hired, first fired, restricted to the worst paid departments, denied membership in most of the unions. When the layoffs came, they came first, and deepest in Black Bottom. 45% unemployment, maybe more. You're not from Black Bottom. You're a white Polish-American man who has no particular claim to be in this neighbourhood at 11 in the morning on a Wednesday. And you're aware of this as you walk these streets. You're aware of the way people look at you. Not hostility, or not usually, but assessment. What do you want here? There's a man on the corner of Hastings and Elliot who you've seen before. You don't know his name. He's about 50, or he might be 40 who looks 50, which is the same math that applies to you. And he runs a sort of informal exchange on this corner, trading goods, connecting people who have things with people who need things, operating in the grey economy that the Depression has made into a real economy. 3 times now you've come here to trade, once with a piece of Dorothy's jewellery she no longer wore and hadn't worn in years, a cameo brooch from her mother that got you $2 and a bag of cornmeal. once with a pair of work boots in good condition that you traded for cash and a bag of potatoes. Today, you're not trading anything. Today, you're here because there's a rumour, which you heard from Wisniewski's wife, who heard it from someone at the relief station, that a man on Elliot Street has a connection to a city jobs programme and is taking names. And sometimes this kind of rumour is true and sometimes it's not, but you always follow it. Today it's not true. The man on Elliot doesn't exist, or doesn't exist in the way the rumour described, or exists but isn't there today. You spend 20 minutes looking and don't find him. The 50 or 40-year-old man on the corner watches you look. Road work, you tell him, when you've given up on the rumour and are passing him on the way back. Jefferson and Bellevue, tomorrow morning, 6:30. They took 10 men today, but maybe they need more. He looks at you. Much obliged, he says. 75 cents a day, you say. Maybe 3 days? He nods. He's already turning to say something to a younger man standing nearby. The information flowing into his network. This corner on Hastings functioning as exactly the node it's functioning as. You head back north. The bread line on Gratiot. You've avoided it for 3 months. You've avoided it for specific reasons that you've been honest with yourself about. Not because you're above it. Not because you think the people in it are doing something wrong. But because as long as you can manage without it, you manage without it. Because the bread line is finite, and the people in it need what's in it. And you've been calculating very finely the question of, do I need it, or can someone else use it more? Today you stop calculating. Today you get in line. The line is in front of St. Peter and Paul, the Jesuit church on Jefferson. Not your church. You're not Catholic, you're Lutheran. And there's a Lutheran relief effort operating out of Zion Church, but it's further, and Zion runs out of things by 11, and it's already 11, so St. Peter and Paul, which has more resources because the Jesuit order has more resources, is where you go. The line is not short. It's 2, maybe 2.5 blocks long. You join the end of it, in front of a shuttered hardware store. Bauer Hardware, established 1891, the paint on the window still legible, the interior dark, the people in line. You've stopped categorizing them in the way you would have categorized them in 1928, by trade, by neighborhood, by origin. That system of categorization has been made irrelevant by the fact that the line contains all of its categories simultaneously. There are men in what are clearly work clothes, heavy canvas, worn boots, the particular grease that never quite washes out of hands that have spent years around machinery. There are women, several of them, some with children. There is a man in a suit, not a fine suit, but a suit that was once the suit of a person with a white-collar job, slightly too big for him now in the way that your coat is too big for you. There is an old man who might be 70, wrapped in a coat and a muffler and a hat, standing very still, conserving warmth. There is a boy, maybe 15, standing alone. He's got the look of a kid who's been on his own for a while. Not dirty exactly, but self-sufficient in a particular way, knowing exactly where to put his hands in the pocket, configuration that maximizes warmth, knowing to stand close to the wall where the wind is less. The line moves slowly. This is the physical fact of a bread line. It moves slowly. The serving is not fast. There's bread to cut, soup to ladle, people to process one by one through the door and out the other side. The people running it are volunteers, mostly. Parish women, some men from the Knights of Columbus, a few young Jesuits in their black cassocks. You stand. The cold comes up through your shoes. The right shoe. The separated heel. You can feel the cold specifically through that gap. A cold that is more purposeful than the general cold. A cold that has found an entry point and is using it. You shift your weight to the left foot. The man in front of you is smoking. He's got a cigarette down to the last half inch and he's drawing on it with the intensity of someone who knows this is the last of it. The smoke drifts back. You breathe it without complaint because the warmth of smoke, even second-hand smoke, is a small warmth. He catches you noticing the cigarette. Want the last of it, he says. You do want the last of it. You'd like to say you don't, but you do. Thanks, you say. He hands it back. You take 2 drawers, which is all that's left in it, and pinch the ember out and put the stub in your pocket. Stemler, he says. His name. Kowalski, you say. A pause. The line moves. 3 feet forward, stop. River Rouge man, he says. 4 years. Briggs, he says. Walter Briggs owned the Briggs Manufacturing Company, which made auto bodies. Body shop, East Side, until last April. April, you say. They said it was temporary. I believed them. The line moves again. 5 feet, 6 feet. You're rounding the corner. You can see the door of the church now, the volunteers at the table inside. You have people, Stemler says. Wife and 2 boys. He nods. I've got a mother. My wife. He stops. My wife is with her family in Toledo until things improve. He says, until things improve, in the way that people say things that might not be true, with a deliberate flatness that holds the feeling at arm's length. I'm sorry, you say. He shrugs. It's a shrug that contains a great deal. The line moves, and then you're inside. The inside of St. Peter and Paul smells like stone and candle wax, and the specific smell of the soup they're serving, which is a bean soup. Heavy, thick, with the salt pork you didn't buy this morning and the onion you did. You can smell the onion in the soup from here, that warm, slightly sweet smell of cooked onion. A woman in an apron gives you a bowl. You take it to the tables they've set up in the nave. Long folding tables, mismatched chairs, the way a church looks when it's been converted into something more practical than worship for the duration. You sit. The soup is hot. You eat it the way you ate the oats this morning, without rushing, with attention, with the body's full intelligence applied to the act of eating. The beans are soft. The broth is thick. There are pieces of onion that have cooked down to softness, translucent. 2 small pieces of what might be pork. You eat the whole bowl. A woman comes by with a pitcher. Refill? You consider this. The line outside is still long. Yes, you say. Thank you. She fills it. You eat the second bowl more slowly because the emergency feeling, the first bowl urgency, has passed, and you can think again. Stemler is 3 seats down. He's eating with the same focused attention. Across the table from you, a young woman is feeding soup to a toddler with a small spoon. The toddler accepting each spoonful with a sort of imperial patience, opening his mouth, waiting. An older man beside the door is praying. He's not making a show of it. He's not loud. He's not performing. He's just sitting with his soup in front of him and his hands together and his lips moving slightly. And then he opens his eyes and picks up his spoon. You think about praying. You haven't prayed in a long time. You're not sure when you stopped. You went to church before, regularly, the Lutheran service on Sunday mornings, because Dorothy wanted to, and because it was a good habit, and because the community of it, the people you saw every week, the particular voice of Reverend Kuhn that was unremarkable in every single way except that it was familiar, was worthwhile. You stopped because of, you'd have to think carefully about when exactly. At some point in the last 18 months. The words of the service, which you'd always said with a kind of comfortable inattention, stopped feeling available to you. Not because you disbelieved them, but because they required a kind of reaching that you didn't have. Because gratitude requires a certain baseline of things to be grateful for, and you had the boys, and you had Dorothy, and you had those potatoes in the bowl at home, but you also had the letter from Ford on its letterhead, and the cold in the apartment, and the 6 cents in your pocket. You look at the old man, his soup, his praying. He managed it, you think. He got to the prayer. Maybe you'll get back there. Probably you will. Once things, you finish the soup. You put the bowl in the return pile by the door. Outside, the air is colder for the contrast with the warm inside. Your body has been warmed and now has to manage the cold again, but it's a different management now. You have something in you, actual food, and the body takes the cold differently when it has something to work with. You start the walk home. You hear it before you see it. You're on Cheney, maybe 3 blocks from your building, when you hear the specific kind of noise that an eviction makes. It's not one sound. It's several sounds happening simultaneously. Voices raised, a child crying, the particular percussion of furniture being moved across floors and downstairs. There's a crowd outside number 1147, which is the building that backs up against the alley behind yours. You've seen the family on the 2nd floor, a man named Dombrowski, wife, 3 children, the oldest maybe 12. You don't know them well. You've nodded at each other. You know the 12-year-old's name is Henrik because you heard his mother call him. The furniture is on the sidewalk. That's the first thing you see as you approach. The furniture on the sidewalk. A kitchen table, plain wood, with cigarette burns on one corner. 2 chairs. A mattress, still with its bedding. The bedding obviously thrown on in a hurry. Sheets and a blanket draped over it in no order. A wooden crate that has children's clothes spilling out of the top. The landlord is on the front steps. You don't know his name. He's a heavy-set man who comes by on the 1st of the month in a brown car, which used to be a symbol of something and now is a symbol of a different thing. He's got a piece of paper in his hand. He's talking to a policeman. There are 2 policemen. Not hostile, not the cruelty police, not the kind that show up to make things worse, but doing their job, which is standing witness to the legal process of removing a family from an apartment they can no longer afford. Mrs. Dombrowski is on the sidewalk. She's standing next to the mattress with the children around her. 2 younger ones, maybe 6 and 8, pressed against her sides. The 12-year-old, Henrik, is standing a little apart, with the specific posture of a boy trying very hard to look older than he is. His jaw is set. He's not crying. You can see what this effort is costing him. Mr. Dombrowski is still inside. You can hear him, hear his voice from above, the 2nd floor window, arguing with someone, either another policeman or the landlord's representative or just the walls. The words are in Polish and not entirely coherent, the way speech gets when the speech is coming from somewhere past reasoning. The crowd on the sidewalk is about 15-20 people, mostly women from the neighbouring buildings. Nobody's doing anything. What would doing something look like? There's a legal process happening. The paper in the landlord's hand is a legal document. The policemen are there to represent the legal process. The family is being removed from their home, which they couldn't pay for, and there is nothing illegal about any of it, and everyone standing on the sidewalk knows this and is standing there anyway, because watching is the only available response. One woman, You recognize her, she's from the building on the left. Goes to the mattress. She starts folding the bedding. She folds the sheet, the blanket, with neat, deliberate folds, and lays them on top. Then she straightens the mattress. Small acts. Acts that say, I see you and your things matter, and I will treat them as if they matter. Another woman brings her baby inside and comes back out without the baby. She picks up the wooden crate. She starts refolding the children's clothes that are spilling out of it. A man from across the street, you don't know him, goes to the kitchen table and rights one of the chairs that had tipped over onto its side. He sets it upright. This is the thing that happens sometimes. Not always. Not enough. But sometimes. The neighbours move the furniture back in. Not in defiance of the law exactly, or in complete disregard of it, but in the spaces the law hasn't explicitly prohibited. You can't stop the eviction, but you can fold the sheets, you can right the chair, you can treat the family's possessions as if they're still that family's possessions and not debris. You put your grocery bag down on the sidewalk. You go to the kitchen table. It's heavier than you thought. Solid wood. Real construction. You lift one end, make eye contact with the man across the street who's still nearby. He takes the other end. Together you carry it back to the bottom of the stoop. It's a symbolic gesture, and you know it. The landlord's paper says they're out, and there's no table position that changes the paper. But you carry the table to the stoop. Then you pick up your grocery bag and you stand next to it. Mr. Dombrowski comes down the stairs. He comes down slowly. Not the slowness of a defeated man exactly, but the slowness of someone who is moving deliberately, because if they move fast, the situation will go somewhere unrecoverable. He's wearing his good coat, his hat. He's holding himself with a stiffness that is dignity taken to its extreme edge. He steps out onto the stoop. He looks at his furniture on the sidewalk and then at the table and chair on the stoop. He looks at the people who moved them. He takes off his hat. He is a man who is 50 years old and has been in this country for 22 years and worked every year of those 22 years. Worked honestly and hard and at real jobs that built real things, and this morning he was told by a man with a piece of paper and 2 policemen to take his family and his furniture and leave. He puts his hat back on. He nods to the man from across the street, to the woman with the baby, to you. He says nothing. The hat is the speech. You nod back. His wife takes his arm. The youngest child, the 6-year-old, takes the other hand. Henrik picks up the wooden crate. The 8-year-old picks up a bundled blanket. They stand there for a moment, the whole family together, on the sidewalk in front of what was their home. You don't know where they're going. A relative, maybe. A church shelter. The relief station might know of something. A boarding situation. A family with a spare room. You look at the 6-year-old's feet. She's wearing shoes. They fit, or close enough. Brown leather with a buckle. They're worn, but they're real shoes. The thing about being in the middle of a situation like this is that you keep doing the comparative arithmetic, which you don't want to do but can't stop doing. They are worse off than I am right now, and I am afraid of becoming what they are, and the gap between where I am and where they are is not large, and this is all one terrain. The family walks north on Cheney. You pick up your grocery bag. The crowd disperses. Slowly, in ones and twos, people go back inside or continue wherever they were going. The furniture sits on the sidewalk. The landlord is still on the stoop, talking to the policeman about something. His voice is low and businesslike. You walk home. Dorothy sees it in your face when you come in. She knows you. the exact coordinates of your expressions, the way that specific things arrange themselves on your face in specific configurations. She sees the day in you before you say anything. What happened? She says. Dombrowski family. Down on 1147. She's quiet. The boys home, you say. Jimmy's at school. Carl's with Mrs. Nowak. I got on the road crew. Jefferson and Bellevue tomorrow, 6:30. She nods. That's... She stops. Good. 75 cents a day. 3 days, maybe 4. Good, she says again, with a different weight on it this time. 3 days, maybe 4. That's $2.25, maybe $3. That pays part of the rent. That pays back the tab at Gorski Brothers. That gets Carl's shoes looked at. You put the grocery bag on the counter. She comes over and looks at it, not going through it, just looking. He gave me a big onion, you say. Dorothy picks up the onion, holds it for a moment. Tonight we'll have soup, she says. The beans and the onions, and the last of the potatoes. She's planning in real time. If I put the beans up now, they'll be ready by 6. I'll get Carl, you say. Sit down for a minute first. You look at her. Sit down, she says. Not a command, an instruction. You sit at the kitchen table. Dorothy puts the beans in the pot and covers them with water. She puts the pot on the burner. She sits down across from you. George, she says. Yeah, we're going to be all right. You look at her face. She means it. Not in the way that people say things they're not sure about. She means it in the specific way she's always meant things, with the dry-eyed practicality that has been one of the reliable features of your life together. Dorothy is not a woman who tells you things will be all right for comfort. She tells you things will be all right when she's done the calculation and decided it's likely. You don't ask what the calculation is. You trust the calculation. Yeah, you say. 3 more months like this, she says. Maybe 4. I talked to Anna, and the Hotel Statler thing is real. 50 cents a morning, 5 days a week. That's $2.50 a week. That leaves Carl. Mrs. Kowalski will take Carl in the mornings. I'll watch her youngest Tuesday afternoons. She has thought through the logistics. She has thought through the logistics in the way she thinks through everything, completely and quietly, and without needing to announce the process. And you get the road work tomorrow, she says, and maybe more days after, and in the spring, she stops. In the spring, things will be different, she says. Roosevelt's going to do something. I don't know what, but he's going to do something. Franklin Roosevelt has just won the election. You voted for him. Almost everyone you know voted for him, even the people who didn't trust him, because he was not Hoover, and Hoover had been Hoover for long enough. Yeah, you say. 3 months, Dorothy says. 3 more months like this, maybe 4, and then different. You believe her. Not because you have evidence, because she's Dorothy and she told you, and that's the evidence. Okay, you say. She puts her hand on the table between you. Not reaching for yours, just putting it on the table, palm down, near enough. You put your hand over it. The beans are starting to heat in the pot. You can hear the water beginning to move. Not a boil yet, just the beginning of it. The first small sounds of heat working through water. Somewhere in the building a door opens and closes. Outside, the streetcar on chain. Jimmy will be home from school by 3. You sit. Jimmy comes home at 3:20. He's got a paper in his hand, a drawing from school, a house with a tree beside it in brown crayon. He gives it to Dorothy without ceremony, the way children give things, completely, with no calculation. What's this? Dorothy says. A house, Jimmy says. Which house? Our house, he says, which it clearly isn't. The house in the drawing has a yard and a second floor, and the tree is enormous. An idealized tree, the platonic form of a tree. But it doesn't matter, because our house means the house that belongs to us, in the way that houses should belong to people. Dorothy puts the drawing on the refrigerator, the ice box, which hasn't had ice in it since October, because ice costs money, and the box works fine as a cold cabinet in November and December, which is a silver lining of Detroit winters. She puts the drawing on the icebox door with a piece of tape. It stays there. You work the gloves through the afternoon. You find them in the drawer where you kept them. Left glove, right glove, brown leather, the kind with a reinforced palm. You work the leather between your hands for 20-30 minutes, bending and folding, warming the stiffness out of them. The leather gives slowly. Your hands, which are used to harder things than glove working, find it easy enough. Carl comes home from Mrs. Nowak at 4. He comes in making the sound of a boy who's had a fine afternoon and wants to report on it. Something about a cat that Mrs. Nowak has, that he was allowed to pet. He demonstrates the petting action with great specificity. You listen to all of it. The beans come up in the late afternoon, Dorothy adding the onion and the salt and the 2 remaining potatoes cut into pieces. The soup thickens. By 5:30 the apartment smells like something that deserves to be inside you. The deep, round smell of bean soup, the sweet undertow of onion, the earthy note of potato. You set the table. This is something you do, always. Whatever is happening, whatever the day has contained, the table gets set. 4 places, 4 bowls, 4 spoons, the bread, what there is of it, the cups of water. You sit down together, the 4 of you. Carl says grace, or what passes for grace with a 6-year-old, which is fast and somewhat grammatically experimental, and ends with thank you for the soup and the cat, and amen. You eat. The soup is good. It's good in the way that simple things made with attention are good. The onion has cooked down to sweetness. The beans are soft and substantial, filling in a way that bread and water is not. The potatoes break apart at the touch of a spoon. Jimmy eats his bowl and then looks at the pot. There's more, you say. He gets up and fills his bowl again. You watch him do this act of a growing boy eating a second bowl, with something that is the opposite of the hollow feeling you had at the gate this morning. The opposite of watching the Dombrowski family walk away with their blanket and their crate. This, a second bowl. Your son getting up and filling it because there's more. Dorothy catches you watching him. She doesn't say anything. After supper, Jimmy does his schoolwork at the table. Subtraction, long columns of numbers, which he approaches with a focused grimness that you recognize as a genetic trait. Carl draws on a piece of paper bag. You give him a piece of the paper bag, the plain back side and a pencil, and he draws something that might be the cat, or might be a person, or might be weather. Dorothy mends Jimmy's socks by the light of the kitchen lamp, her needle moving in the small, precise stitches she's been making since she was a girl in Poland. You read. You borrowed a book from the library, a history of the Roman Republic, which is not particularly relevant to anything in your life, but which is absorbing in the way that the deeply distant past is absorbing. People made decisions. Things happened. The decisions led to other things. Everyone in it is dead and has been for 2,000 years, which gives you a kind of perspective. The lamp is low. You're conserving the oil. But there's enough light to read by if you sit close enough. At 8, the boys go to bed. Carl wants a story. You make one up. You've been making up stories for Carl for 2 years. You started when he was 4 and couldn't sleep, and you found that a specific kind of story, with clear, simple events and a comfortable repetition, worked where everything else hadn't. The stories involve a dog named Biscuit, who is a made-up dog, who goes on various made-up adventures that always resolve in a way that involves warmth and safety and something to eat. Tonight, Biscuit finds a cabin in the snow, and the cabin has a fire going and there's soup on the fire. Bean soup, Carl says. Bean soup, you say. Like we had? Exactly like we had. Carl is satisfied with this. Biscuit eats the soup, curls up by the fire. Good night, Biscuit, Carl says. Good night, you say. His breathing changes within 3 minutes. He's under. The kitchen at 9:30 at night. Dorothy's in the bedroom. You can hear her moving, the sound of her, the specific domestic sound of another person in the adjacent room, a sound you've been so saturated with for 12 years that its absence would be a physical sensation. The lamp on the table. You've poured yourself a small glass of something. There's a bottle in the cabinet, a pint of rye whiskey, which has been there since September, and which you drink from very carefully, because a pint of rye in September might have to last until March if you're not careful. You've been very careful. You pour maybe a finger's worth. You sit at the table. On the table in front of you, the paper bag, or the remainder of the paper bag. The piece you wrote the list on this morning is in your coat pocket. It came back blank side down in the pocket, and you'll use the blank side for something. Maybe Carl's drawing paper, maybe a note. But the rest of the bag, the Gorski Brothers paper bag from the groceries, is on the table, flattened. You look at it. This is a grocery bag that held a tin of lard, a bag of flour, a box of salt, 2 pounds of dried beans, a container of oats, a block of soap, and 1 onion. All of those things have been put away. The bag is empty and flat. You fold it in half, once, twice. Tuck it in the drawer where the paper things go. It'll be Carl's drawing paper. You think about the Dombrowski family. You wonder where they are tonight. There are relief houses. You've heard of them. Brick row houses on the east side that the city rents for essentially nothing to evicted families for short periods while they get back on their feet. You hope they're in one of those. You hope Henrik is somewhere warm. You think about tomorrow, 6:30, Jefferson and Bellevue. Bring your own gloves. You look at the gloves on the counter. Soft now, work through, lying flat. Ready. 75 cents a day. 3 days, maybe 4. You think about Roosevelt. What Dorothy said. 3 months, then different. You don't know what different will look like. In the history of Rome, the things that seem permanently ruinous sometimes were and sometimes weren't. The Republic survived catastrophes that seemed unsurvivable. It also fell eventually. The thing about history is that you're always in the middle of it when you're living it. You never know which story you're in. You think about the list: lard, flour, salt, dried beans, oats, soap, 1 onion if possible. You think about who wrote it, which is you this morning at 4:53 a.m. in a cold kitchen with a short pencil and a piece of paper bag. You wrote it with the 3rd finger of your left hand that bends wrong at the knuckle. You wrote it standing up because you hadn't sat down yet. You're going to be okay. You don't know this absolutely. You know it in the way Dorothy told you this afternoon, which is probably based on evidence. Based on knowing yourself and knowing her and knowing the specific math of your specific situation, which is bad but not unsurvivable, which is tight but not impossible. You finish the whiskey. You blow out the lamp. In the dark, the kitchen is just shapes. The shape of the table, the chairs, the shape of the window over the sink, a faint grey rectangle where the light from the airshaft comes in. The Kowalski apartment across the gap is dark. They're asleep. They have their own morning coming. You go to bed. Dorothy's awake. You can tell, the two still breathing. She's doing the midnight numbers in her head rather than on paper, a more portable calculation. You lie down, the ceiling above you, the thumbprint water stain, old companion. The soup was good, you say. A pause. The onion, she says. Marek gave us a big one. He's a good man. He is. Quiet. 6:30 tomorrow, she says. I know. I'll wake you. I'm always awake. She makes the sound that means, I know you are. You close your eyes. The city keeps talking to you through the window. Detroit at 10, 11 at night, is not entirely quiet. The streetcars run until midnight. The factories that are still running, the ones that kept a night shift, a skeleton crew, running single products on minimum power. They rumble their low constant rumble. You've always been able to hear in bed on quiet nights if you paid attention. Tonight you pay attention. You listen to the rumble. It's there. Reduced from what it was. Quieter, thinner. But there. The machinery is running. The city has not entirely stopped. This is something. You let your body settle into the mattress. The mattress is old, softer in some places than others, and you've learned the topography of it. You know which position puts the soft spot at your hip and which avoids it. You're a man who knows the exact geography of his own mattress in the dark, which is not the life you imagined, but it is a life and you are in it. The cold. The cold is still there, but your body is making heat. The sheets warming around you, the blanket catching it and holding it. The boys are in the next room. You can hear Carl sometimes. He makes small sounds in his sleep, protests against something in the dream world, quiet objections, nothing serious. You breathe, one breath, in, long. The cold air is still in the room, but your lungs have warmed it by the time it reaches you, the body performing its small, constant miracle of converting the external into the internal, cold to warm, outside to inside. You think about the list, not the grocery list, the other list, the internal list, the one you don't write on paper bags, the one that goes Dorothy, Jimmy, Carl, working gloves, road crew, 6:30, beans on the stove. Tomorrow, this list. This is the list that matters. You think about the man on the stoop across the street this morning. Nowhere to be. The specific vertigo of that. Of time with no structure to it. Days that don't have a clock they're oriented around. Tomorrow your clock will be at 6:30. You're grateful for this. This is a real thing to be grateful for. A 6:30 that matters. The city hums. Your hands are on your chest. You feel the rise and fall. Your hands know the morning. They know how to hold a grocery bag, how to work a glove soft, how to carry a kitchen table. Your hands have done harder things than tomorrow requires. Your hands have been in a press that jammed and come out wrong and still worked. Your hands still work. The days ahead are visible to you in a certain way, which is to say, not visible at all, and yet you can feel their general shape. Cold days, long days. The road crew on Jefferson, digging in frozen ground, your mattock ringing off buried cobblestones, your breath making clouds, your back finding the old muscle memory of outdoor labour. 75 cents each day going into the envelope in the kitchen drawer. 3 days, 4 days, the tab at Gorski Brothers going down. Dorothy at the Hotel Statler, mornings, the streetcar fare coming out of the 50 cents and leaving 40-odd, but 40-odd is 40-odd, and it adds to the envelope. Carl with Mrs. Kowalski, learning something about cats from that household's cat. Jimmy at school, his feet cramped in shoes that are half a size too small, but feet in shoes, going to school, learning the subtraction. The soup lasting 2 more days from what Dorothy put up. The flour bag working through to another bag. The tin of lard replenished, doing its work on the cast iron pan. These are the days ahead. They are not dramatic days. They are not the days people write history books about. They are the days that are happening to most of the country right now, to the 15-20% of Americans out of work, to the millions of people who have done everything right by any reasonable accounting and found themselves in this landscape anyway, through no failure of character or will or effort, through the simple fact of having been working people in the moment when an economy decided to collapse. You are one of them. The city, centuries from now. Detroit will change beyond what you can imagine from this bed. The factories you know, River Rouge, Packard, Briggs, Dodge, Main, will have long fates. Some are longer than others. River Rouge will keep going into a future that would astonish you. The River Rouge plant you stood outside today, in 1932, with your neutral face and your warm gloves in your coat pocket, it will still be there in the 21st century. Not the same plant. Rebuilt, modernized, converted. But the basic structure, the footprint on the river, still there. Your grandchildren's grandchildren might drive past it. The streets you walked today, Sheen, Jefferson, Hastings, Beaubien, will change. Black Bottom will be demolished in the 1960s, cleared for a highway and an urban renewal project that was not renewal to the people who lived there. The jazz clubs on Hastings Street will be gone. The Fox Theatre will survive barely, and then be saved in the 1980s and become a historic treasure and a concert venue. The Hotel Statler, where Dorothy will clean rooms starting next week, it will close eventually, sit empty for years, be demolished. The Hudson's department store on Woodward will close in 1983, the tallest abandoned building in North America for a while, demolished in 1998. The city will shrink. The 1.5 million people will become 1 million, then 800,000, then 600,000 in later decades. The factories automated or moved. The economic logic that built Detroit in 1920 gradually becoming obsolete. There will be other hard years, years that in some ways rhyme with this one, years when the city you built your life in will seem to be falling apart in a way that feels permanent. And people will still live there, will still wake up in apartments on cold November mornings and put their feet on cold floors and go into cold kitchens and make the oats. We'll still write lists on paper bags. We'll still negotiate with store owners. We'll still stand in lines. We'll still carry tables back to stoops and fold sheets with careful hands. The human inventory doesn't change. The people change. The machines change. The money changes form. The list. The actual, penciled, practical list of what a family needs to get through a week is not so different from any list that has ever been written since people started writing lists. Lard, flour, salt, beans, oats, soap, 1 onion if possible, food and warmth and clean enough. The irreducible minimum. The thing people have been organising their days around since before your grandmother's grandmother had write. You are not alone in this. You never were. The people in this city, in this depression, in this winter, they are not alone in the deep historical sense. though they are alone in the immediate sense that's harder to deal with. They are part of a long line of people who have stood at exactly this kind of edge and found, mostly, that the edge did not go over. Some of them did go over. Stemler from the breadline. You don't know his story. Some men's stories have endings that are the worst kind. The woman whose toddler waited patiently for the spoon. You don't know her story. Some of these stories end in ways you don't want to know, but mostly people find their way to the 6:30, to the road crew, to the hotel job, to the soup with the big onion. Mostly. Your eyes are heavy. The day has moved through you. All of it, the oats and the list and the grocery store and the gate and the bread line and the Dombrowski family and the soup and the story about biscuit and the fire and the whiskey. It has all moved through you and settled, the way a long day settles, into the weight behind your eyes and the ache in the back of your legs from 4 miles of pavement. Tomorrow at 6:30, you'll be on Jefferson and Bellevue with your gloves and your mattock and your back. The ground will be cold and hard, and the work will be real, and at the end of it 75 cents will exist that doesn't exist now. That's tomorrow, tonight, just this, the ceiling, the breathing in the room, the city's low hum. You have enough blanket. You're warm enough. You're fed enough. Not perfectly, not abundantly, enough. The children in the next room are breathing the steady breath of children who do not know yet, not really, the full shape of what their parents are managing. They will know later. Jimmy will know sooner than Carl. They'll carry something of this. The way their parents' generation always carries something of what shaped their early years, some calibration of what is enough and what isn't, some knowledge in the body of what cold actually means. That's all right. The things you carry from difficult times are not only bad things. You know how to save paper bags. You know the value of a big onion. You know that soup made from dried beans and an onion and salt and attention is genuinely good. You know that 6:30 matters. That the gloves you kept in the drawer for 18 months in case of something like this were worth keeping. You know that Dorothy's midnight numbers are reliable, that she's done the math. You know that your son will eat a second bowl if there's more, and that this is everything, this is the whole thing, this is what it's for. Let sleep take you. Let the hum of the city become the hum of a much older thing. The hum of people in cold rooms in difficult years finding their way to morning. Let the list fade. The lard and the flour and the salt and the beans and the oats and the soap and the one onion. Let them become what they are, which is things done, handled, in their places, the soup eaten. Let the day go. You've done what the day required. The road crew at 6:30, the gloves worked soft, the soup made, the story told, the table set. That's enough. That's exactly enough. The church bells somewhere on Cheen. 11 o'clock. 7.5 hours until you need to be anywhere. Your breathing slows. The thumbprint water stain above you. Your old companion. The ceiling of this apartment. The ceiling that has been over you through 18 months of this. Blurs as your eyes go soft, as the sharp edges of things become general shapes, become nothing particular. The hum. Dorothy's breathing. Slow and steady now. She got there too. The city. The river somewhere. Moving. The men who will be at Jefferson and Bellevue at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Where they are right now. In their apartments. In their cold bedrooms. Finding their way towards 6:30 through this night. You with them. All of you going toward it together. Separately. In your separate apartments in this city that is surviving itself. the way it's been surviving itself for 100 years and will survive itself for 100 more. Let the night be long enough. Let there be rest in it. Let the morning come when it comes. You've earned it. You've earned exactly this. This bed, this blanket, this thickness behind the eyes. That is the body's honest accounting of what has been done and what remains. Take it, sleep, and dream, if you dream at all of the spring. It will come, Dorothy said. Good night.